We want to welcome you this afternoon to the Joint Seapower and Projection Forces and Coast Guard and Maritime Transportation hearing on Naval Cooperative Strategy. We thank our witnesses for being here. Normally we would have opening statements by the chairman and ranking members of both committees or subcommittees, but today all of the chairman and ranking members have agreed to waive their opening remarks. They will be placed in the record. Mr. Courtney, that's my understanding, and Mr. Hunter, it is as well. So we're delighted today to have three very distinguished witnesses to appear before our joint hearing. We have Vice Admiral Charles Michael, U.S. Coast Guard, the Deputy Commandant for Operations, Major General Andrew O'Donnell, the U.S. Marine Corps Assistant Deputy Commandant, Combat Development and Integration, Deputy Commanding General, Marine Corps Combat Development Command, and Rear Admiral Kevin Donegan, U.S. Navy Acting Deputy Chief of Naval Operations for Operations, Plans, and Strategy. Gentlemen, we want to thank you for your work on this strategy. You've done a great job. We look forward to hearing your comments. We will put your full testimony in the record, but we'd love to have you take 5 minutes or so to summarize it in any way that you would like to do so. And so I don't know which of you would like to start off, but we're going to turn the floor over. Okay, Admiral, we're going to recognize you now and look forward to your comments.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chairman. Chairman Forbes, Chairman Hunter, Ranking Member Courtney, and distinguished members of the committees, good afternoon, and thank you for the opportunity to testify today on the Coast Guard's role in the cooperative strategy for 21st century sea power, forward, engaged, ready. With the committee's permission, I also propose to enter the strategy document itself into the record. The Coast Guard stands ready alongside the Navy and Marine Corps, reaffirming our unified commitment to confront national security threats from and on the sea. The Coast Guard is a member of the nation's 5 armed services and a global maritime force that complements the other sea services' roles in fulfilling the nation's broad maritime goals. The Coast Guard leverages unique authorities, capabilities, and partnerships essential to national and homeland security. The Coast Guard is, at all times, an armed service under Title 10 and simultaneously has broad law enforcement authorities under Title 14. The Coast Guard provides its greatest contributions to the collective strategy in the critical areas of maritime security operations, all-domain access, and maintaining flexible, agile, and ready forces. Maritime security operations protect sovereignty and maritime resources, support free and open seaborne commerce, and deter and counter threats that seek to exploit the maritime domain, including weapons proliferation, terrorism, transnational crime, piracy, sanctions avoidance, and unlawful seaborne migration. As the Navy and Marine Corps rebalance efforts to address national imperatives in the Asia-Pacific region, Coast Guard operations projected forward in the Western Hemisphere Transit Zone increase in importance. The Coast Guard's Offshore Patrol Cutter, or OPC, acquisition is the key service recapitalization to maintain our forward deployed complementary non-redundant capability in combating transnational criminal networks, the greatest threat to national security in this hemisphere. These assets can't arrive too soon. Our medium endurance cutters currently on scene, which annually interdict more than 3 times the amount of cocaine seized domestically and at every air, land, and sea border of the United States, will be 55 years old on average when the first OPC deploys to the Western Hemisphere Transit Zone. The Coast Guard also plays a unique role in achieving all-domain access. The Coast Guard's ability to operate in polar regions ensures the nation's maritime security interests are met in increasingly strategic Arctic Ocean as well as in Antarctica. Through its unique authorities and international partnerships, the Coast Guard has an active maritime security presence in 29 countries and has 60 bilateral agreements with foreign governments that enhance maritime governance, rule of law, and global leadership. In the cyber domain, Coast Guard authorities and responsibilities span the .mil, .gov, and .com domains. To accomplish the collective goals of this strategy, it is imperative for our forces to remain flexible, agile, and ready. Critical to remaining forward, on call, and ready 24/7 to engage in a strategic and complementary manner are investments in the OPC acquisition, improved aviation capabilities, integrated command and control systems, and a proficient workforce. In conclusion, the Coast Guard is fully committed to the strategic priorities of the strategy and remains a forward, engaged, and ready member of our sea services across the globe and at the strategic, operational, and tactical levels. Thank you for the opportunity to testify before you today and for all you do for the men and women of the nation's armed forces and specifically its sea services. I look forward to answering your questions.
Admiral Schell, thank you so much for your testimony, for being here with us today. General, we now recognize you.
Thank you, sir. Chairman Forbes, Ranking Member Courtney, Chairman Hunter, Ranking Member Garamendi, and distinguished
General,
members.
you might want to pull that mic just a little closer. Sometimes it's difficult picking up.
Thanks. The Marine Corps' ability to serve as the nation's premier crisis response force is due in large part to this subcommittee's continued strong support. And on behalf of all Marines, I thank you. Admiral Michel highlighted some key points from the cooperative strategy of the 21st century Seapower, and I'd like to briefly highlight the role your Marine Corps as an element of U.S. power. When it comes to being where it matters, when it matters, the Marine Corps is committed to keeping our force forward deployed and forward engaged. This means that today there are around 30,000 Marines deployed in over 40 countries. These forces are currently conducting strikes in Syria and Iraq, training the Iraqi army, and protecting our embassy in Baghdad. They also include 22,500 Marines in the Pacific, all of which are west of the international date line. These forces are conducting exercises and training with our Pacific partners and are staged to rapidly respond to any crisis or contingency in the region. As Admiral Donegan will mention, this strategy recognizes that we will continue to invest in strengthening alliances and also partnerships. Marines deployed onboard amphibious ships and those forces forward station routinely conduct theater security cooperation, exercises to ensure interoperability, and enhance our partners' capabilities. There is no substitute for the mission, and as this committee has heard before, virtual presence is actual absence. This strategy paints a path forward in operating an increasingly complex environment. It complements and amplifies the characteristics required of the Marine Corps and our capstone concept, Expeditionary Force 21. In doing so, it highlights the importance of naval forces in gaining and maintaining overseas access in peace or war. Your Navy Marine Corps team provides the United States the ability to project sustainable combat power overseas without the need to ask for assistance or permission from anyone. This capability is essential to protecting our citizens, advancing our national interest, and promoting global stability. Today's security environments, as well as the challenges, constrained, and uncertain budgets, require creative responses to fulfill our global commitments. Our forward stationed and deployed Marines remain our nation's 911 force in readiness, and this strategy will ensure that they remain poised to do so in the future. Thank you for your opportunity to be here today, and I look forward to answering your questions.
Thank you, General. Admiral Donegan.
Chairman Forbes, Ranking Member Courtney, Chairman Hunter, Ranking Member Garamendi, distinguished members, thank you for the opportunity to appear before you today with my shipmates from the Marine Corps and Coast Guard to discuss this Sea Services Cooperative Strategy for 21st Century Seapower. With the permission of the subcommittee, I propose to keep my remarks brief, but have submitted a separate statement for the Department of the Navy that the General.
All of the remarks will be so ordered it'll be put in the record. Thank you.
Thank you. Now offer a brief overview of the strategy and then touch on some of the, just a few of the highlights. First, the Cooperative Strategy for 21st Century Seapower, Forward, Engaged, and Ready, explains how we will build and employ the naval forces in support of national security interests. It describes a force built and ready for any challenge from high-end warfight to humanitarian operations. Now, the strategy was revised mainly due to changes in the geopolitical landscape since 2007, including threats from violent extremist organizations like the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant, evolving threats from North Korea and Iran, potential opportunities and challenges with a rising China, and recent Russian aggression in the Ukraine. Additionally, we face new and evolving challenges that threaten our access in cyberspace and the global commons. We have also sought to align our maritime strategy to new national strategic guidance and are very aware of the impact of changes in the current fiscal environment. Most importantly, this strategy describes a sea power that is critical for our nation and our global economy. The strategy is underpinned by a Navy, naval services with combat credible forward presence that will be where it matters when it matters, and our continued commitment to our allies and partners. We will also continue to meet the historic naval functions of deterrence, sea control, power projection, and maritime security. But our strategy has adapted, starting with an emphasis on warfighting first In addition, we describe a new function, all-domain access, that focuses on maintaining the access we need to be where it matters when it matters. The strategy balances the disposition of our forces and capabilities against regional threats. It also embraces innovation and efficiency in building a modern and capable force of more than 300 ships that will overcome any challenge to our ability to fight and win. Several key takeaways from the strategy include warfighting first. Defending our nation and winning its wars is a core task of the U.S. Navy and U.S. Marine Corps. Due to varied threats we face as a nation, the sea services, the U.S. Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard, together with other services, must have the capabilities and capacity to defeat any adversary and defend the homeland while honoring our alliances worldwide. Where it matters, when it matters, means that operating forward, we will provide the President options to defend our interests, deter and de-escalate hostilities, respond to crises, and keep conflict far from our shores. The naval services also protect the strength of our U.S. economy by globally deploying that combat-credible power to ensure the unimpeded flow of commerce. We recognize one of our advantages as a nation and a Navy has been our extensive networks of alliances, partnerships, and coalitions. By leveraging the robust capabilities of naval forces worldwide, we're better postured to collectively face new and emerging challenges in the 21st century. Accordingly, we're going to look for new ways to enhance relationships and form partnerships with traditional and non-traditional maritime partners who share a stake in international commerce, safety, security, and freedom of the seas. Our new essential function, all-domain access, will ensure that we organize, train, and equip to overcome threats and assure access and freedom of action in any domain to enable us to fight and win should war be inescapable. Our strategy also continues the efforts to rebalance forces to the Asia-Pacific. Evolving challenges in the region, including the recent activities of China's Navy and the proliferation of anti-access area denial technologies, require that we maintain a leading role in that region. Our force design construct ensures our capability and capacity to support global presence requirements. In building the future force, we're going to balance investments in a flexible, agile force while appropriately developing our people as well as the operational concepts and capabilities to remain capable and combat ready. Finally, I will note that the new strategy is not the end of our work. It's part of a larger effort throughout the Navy to energize our existing culture of strategic thinking that has led to innovation and an increase in operational excellence. This has already been instrumental in aligning our budget requirements and operational concepts. The strategic continuum will also align our strategic documents, will oversee iterative wargaming, new concept development, and further increase those strategic linkages to the budget. In closing, our foremost priority remains the security and prosperity of our nation, the American people, and our way of life. The strategy ensures that the Navy, Marine Corps, and Coast Guard remain forward, engaged, and ready to continue protecting American citizens and advancing U.S. interests as we have done for more than 2 centuries. Thank you.
Admiral, thank you. And since we have a joint hearing today and a lot of members who want to ask questions, I'm going to defer my questions to the Vice Chairman of the Seapower and Projection Forces Subcommittee and the Chairman of the T&I Coast Guard Maritime Transportation Subcommittee, Mr. Hunter from California.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I guess my first question or first comment is, I'm on the Armed Services Committee too. We don't see the Coast Guard in here very often. I mean, it's kind of a strange thing that you're not in here more often, but it's good that you are at the same time. I guess the first question I have is about the Arctic. Let's talk about the Arctic. There's no plans to get an icebreaker unless the Navy buys in, and unless there's a whole of government approach. We're probably not going to have an icebreaker. We're not going to buy one. We're going to have to lease one, but at the very least, I'd like to know what the Navy buy-in is, and if the Navy really, do we care about the Arctic? And if we don't, that's fine. And if we do, what are we doing about it?
Sir, clearly you directed that at the Navy. From our, this strategy clearly talks about the Arctic. It talks about it in a couple ways. We address it in relation to climate change and...
Admiral, let me be more specific. You need an icebreaker to get up there and break ice to be able to operate there. So I don't care about the climate change stuff at all, frankly. I'm curious about the actual icebreaker and acquiring a ship that can break ice to get the Navy and the Marine Corps and whoever else up there, or having to save somebody if you had to.
Yes, sir. As you know, that the different missions and focuses are given to different services and different organizations. The U.S. Coast Guard was given the responsibility for the National Icebreaking Mission, so we're working closely with the Coast Guard as we identify the operating requirements and capabilities needed for future icebreakers. We absolutely agree in the future that we're going to need to be up there more than we are today. From the Navy side, we're increasing the exercises we do up there in our research so we understand that domain. But we do agree that in the future we're going to need to be up there more often.
Okay. The Coast Guard's budget is minuscule compared to yours. The Coast Guard's budget also got cut by the president by 26%, just their acquisition budget. So they're not going to be able to make the ships that they need going back about 10 years, let alone a $400 million icebreaker, $400 million to $1 billion icebreaker. So it's going to take Navy money. It's going to take something like that.
Sir, as you know, the Navy has its own challenges in the shipbuilding account, and it's adding an icebreaker, not being something that was tasked to the Navy to do, would only pressurize our accounts further. But I fully understand your point of view, sir. And
so you all recognize the mission. You're right about the Arctic, but really don't have any way to get up there or do anything there. We just say it's important.
Sir, for us, as we talk about in this strategy, we talk about when we need to be up there and for what missions that we have. And for the portion that I was going to mention a little bit earlier was our Arctic roadmap lays out for us how we're going to do that and when in the future we believe we have to be there more than we do today. And you're right, sir. As a country, we have to figure out and make sure that we have that access as those areas open up for us to move about and commerce starts to travel the routes that we know are beginning to open now.
That's all I have. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Appreciate it.
Mr. Courtney is recognized.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And like Chairman Hunter, it is a pleasure to see the Coast Guard here in the room today. Last time Mr. Whitman and I were over in Brunei, we were touring the Fifth Fleet ships that were tied up there, and all of a sudden we saw two white hulls there and actually had a great visit on board the ship. The captain, of course, was trained at the Coast Guard Academy in New London, but frankly, it was nothing but high praise from the Navy partners in terms of the work that the Coast Guard was doing in that mission. And obviously, this report, really is just a confirmation of what's really happening. This isn't just sort of talk that we're hearing about today. I just really have one question, which is about the Sea Lift and Logistics Force piece of the puzzle that you guys are working on here. I think you agree that this is a vital piece of our ability to execute the national military strategy, regardless of area of responsibility. Given the age of the Ready Reserve Fleet and its need for recapitalization, coupled with the fragility of the Maritime Security Program, what measures are being taken to ensure that we will have a viable and stable sea lift and logistics fleet in order to execute this new maritime strategy? And anyone who wants to take that question, the floor is yours.
Well, sir, I think I'll take it first and then see if there's others. I think you'll see in the strategy that strategic sea lift is a key element of the Sea Service's ability to sustain forward operations. In particular, in the strategy, what we talk about is it's expected that the naval services can establish a sea base, and from that sea base, we need to be able to do what it is that we need to do, whether that be project power, whether it be to launch the Marines ashore on an amphibious operation, or to just have the presence that we need to have in the area. Critical to that is being able to sustain that sea base, and that comes through a combination, as you know, of the Combat Logistics Force and also the Maritime Security Program and the other methods we use to support that force. Aerial refueling, for example, is another method. So we absolutely agree that it's a requirement. What we're working on now is defining. We understand the MSP program, for instance, is under pressure, especially as we move forward to the future. We understand that combat logistics forces that we have right now, we have to look at them closely. We've just completed a study on the combat logistics force piece of the question that told us that we have enough of the combat logistics force to sustain our operations in peacetime. And what we're going to do in the coming months is continue that work through our iterative wargaming process, where we look at the sea lift, military sea lift security program and the combat logistics forces and ensure that for each of the war plans that we have and and the other future operations, that we have a method to be able to continue to sustain that sea base. It's absolutely essential that we do that, and we need to continue to make sure we have that in the future as some of these programs come under pressure.
Mr. Garamendi, I know you were detained and got here just a few minutes after we started, but we also have recognized we put all of our opening remarks in the record, and yours will be placed in the record. And Mr. Garamendi is the ranking member of the subcommittee, so we now recognize you for any questions that you may have.
Thank you very much, Chairman Forbes. My colleague, the chairman of the subcommittee, Mr. Hunter, raised the question of the Arctic and the lack of an icebreaker. This is really a question that goes to Admiral Michael, but really to inform my colleagues on the naval side of this committee that we're not going to be able to put together a new icebreaker without, as Mr. Hunter said, an all-of-government strategy, one that we're going to have to take money from several different places in order to make this happen. The National Science Foundation is interested. The Navy is, and as Mr. Hunter pointed out very carefully, and certainly the Coast Guard. So we're going to have to figure out some way to do that. My question really goes a little beyond the very important point that Mr. Hunter raised, and it goes to the existing Polar Star. You have authority, Admiral Michael, to take the ship out of the water, check it out. What's the status of that process?
Well, there's a couple different Polar class icebreakers. The Polar Star is actually operational right now, and I had
the other one.
Yeah, I know they get confusing. I just had the pleasure of presenting a Master Cutterman certificate to the captain of the Polar Star at McMurdo Station down in Antarctica here just about 6 weeks ago. So the Polar Star is active. It's actually on its way to a regular maintenance dry dock. The Polar Sea, on the other hand, has been inactive for a number of years, had a major machinery casualty. There is money in the President's budget that continues the preservation work on there and begins the survey process of determining how much it would take in order to reactivate that ship. Understand, both these ships, the Polar class, were built in the mid-'70s. Some of the technology, actually most of the technology on there has been only exists in museums anymore. So this is kind of a challenge. Plus, Polar Sea in part was cannibalized so that we could get Polar Star underway. So it's in a different condition than Polar Star is. So we've got a process here to try to get our arms around that and start looking at what resources it would take in order to activate a ship like that. And that's where we stand with the Polar class reactivation.
Had a 4 letters when question.
Well, the preservation work is going on right now. We anticipate it's 15 to 18 months for us to get a good survey of the ship. It's going to have to be pulled out of the water. Again, we're going to have to do a serious survey on some very old machinery that you can't even really purchase anymore. So 15 to 18 months is our estimate so that we can get a sort of a good cost on what that would take and a good timeline for how long it would take to get that reactivated. And again, we'd be looking for about a 7 to 10 year reactivation time span is what we'd be shooting for.
How about a new icebreaker? When will you finalize the requirements for that?
So a new icebreaker, we're in the early stages of an acquisition of that icebreaker, and we've been doing some of the work on that. The problem is, sir, is that we have not built a heavy Polar class icebreaker in this country for over 40 years. The Polar class was the last that were done. And these are exceedingly complicated ships just because they exist in one of the most challenging environments on the Earth, and they're basically designed to collide with blocks of solid ice. So this requires special steels, construction techniques, and things like that. You're looking at many years in order to be able to scope out a project like this, determine who could actually in this country build a vessel of this class. The only operators of heavy Polar class icebreakers are us and the Russians. That's it. So there's very limited expertise in this area. It's going to be expensive, particularly if we have to build one.
We know that we buy our rocket engines from Russia. Maybe we can buy a ship from Russia, since you seem not to be too anxious to get about the task.
Well, it would obviously require legislative action in order to purchase a ship from Russia.
Well,
but
we understand that. But what my question really goes to is that you seem to be hemming and hawing and putting off someday into the future what our subcommittee thinks to be a very, very important activity. Mainly, we need an icebreaker. The Navy needs an icebreaker. This country needs an icebreaker. And the United States is now the chair of the Polar Committee. And all I'm hearing from you is we're going to get about it someday, 16 to 15 to 18 months to figure out whether the present ship can even float. And then who knows how long before the requirements are in place. It's not satisfactory.
I understand
satisfactory.
the dire situation, sir. I was there looking at that only pathway in and out of Antarctica that our ship is the only one that can break.
Well,
but here's where we are with acquisitions. As dire as we are on the polar icebreaker, and I as a sailor understand that, it keeps me up at night. The OPC is even more dire, and that's a much larger class of ships that even on the trajectory that we're talking about, 55 years old is the average age of the
we
ships that's going
understand
to be
that.
coming offline.
Admiral, you seem not to understand where I'm driving you. Your committee knows that it needs, that this country needs one more heavy icebreaker. We can't get by with just one. We need another one. The Navy and the Polar, all of those issues are before us. And what I am hearing from you is the inability for the Coast Guard to get us the specific information that we need to be able to make a decision about where to go with this issue. You're saying 18 months before we know whether we can rebuild the existing. And you seem not to, I don't know, 5 to 7 years or maybe longer before you are willing to give us the requirements for a new one. We want to make a decision. We cannot make that decision without the information that you need to develop for us sooner than later. I hope I'm clear here.
Yes, sir, and I'll provide you that information as soon as I can get it. This is a complex effort.
I think I had best stop because I'm about to climb up and down your back. That answer is not a satisfactory answer. As soon as you can get it. I'm looking at a time frame here where we've been prepared for more than a year and a half now to make a decision. We need your information in this time frame. I understand we're not going to get it this year, but if you come to us next year with the same attitude and the same delay and obfuscation, I can guarantee you that at least the ranking member of this committee is not going to be happy. I yield back my time.
We thank the gentleman, and before I go to Chairman Whitman, we do point out, I think our witnesses would love to build some more ships if we can get them some money to do it with. I know Admiral Donegan from his Navy account is looking at the Ohio class replacement that's going to be $60 billion and scratching his head as to where we're going to get that. I know I was just looking at our combatant commander requirements for BMD capability. They go up from this year at 44 ships to needing 77 in FY16, and yet we were getting ready to put aside 11 carriers, which had 5 of those BMD, and last year the Marine Corps had to fight to get its amphibious ship, which we wouldn't have got if it hadn't have been for Mr. Whitman's hard work on his subcommittee. So we want to continue to work with you guys, and I think Mr. Garamendi, Mr. Hunter, saying if you can help get the information. We realize you can't build it without dollars, so we do thank you for your help in that. Chairman Whitman, recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you so much for your service to our nation. I do want to drill down a little bit into the Cooperative 21st Seapower strategy. Some questions come up with that. Admiral Michael, you talked about flexibility and agility. I think that's critical. The question then becomes, though, is how do you operationalize that? And I want to get everybody's perspective. How do you operationalize that between the Joint Chiefs and the COCOMs, especially with all the challenges they have? And as you know, the strategy now says that we're going to have all domain access, in addition to the other 4 tenets of Seapower. The question is how do you achieve that? How do you make sure, too, that within your C2, your command and control, how do you make sure that you integrate the Coast Guard into that? We see integration of the Coast Guard in certain mission sets, but not in every mission set. So, and with there being organizational differences or separation between the Coast Guard and the Navy Marine Corps, much of this sounds great, but the question is how do you operationalize that, and then adding to the complexity of saying now we're going to have all domain access, which means in the electromagnetic spectrum, in cyberspace, air, sea, land. I mean, that's a pretty complex environment. How are we going to achieve that? They're great assertions in the strategy. Give us your thoughts about operationalization.
I'll take it here from Coast Guard perspective. First of all, in the equipment that we buy, we try to make sure that's interoperable with the other sea services. So we carry Navy-type, Navy-owned equipment on the majority of the vessels that we operate because we're required to operate as a specialized service of the Navy during time of war or when the President directs. So we ensure interoperability through our equipment purchases. We also operate...
Michael, let me stop you right there because I think that's an interesting question I want to build on. As we're talking about shipbuilding and building lots of ships, we talk about building a Navy ships, DDGs, CGs. We talk about building medium endurance cutters, the new class of medium endurance cutters, the long range cutters. Seems like to me there's a great opportunity there to say, listen, why don't we look at some common hull forms? So when we do acquisition, we're not acquiring Coast Guard ships here and Navy ships there. We can say, listen, the National Security Cutter is real similar to the DDG. Why? Give me your perspective on how we can gain economies there to where if we're going to have this cooperative strategy, does cooperation get down to the operational perspective of getting ships on the water?
Well, it absolutely does, and we had a very robust discussion with the Navy as we were determining the requirements for the National Security Cutter, including looking at the LCS and some of the other things that the Navy was doing. Now, the LCS didn't end up being exactly what we needed for the Coast Guard. It's a little bit more ship than I think the Coast Guard needed for its mission set, but a very robust dialogue that went in there. On the other vessels, the FRCs are probably a little bit small for most of the what the Navy is doing, and the OPC is going to have its own requirements. But again, Coast Guard tries to borrow and leverage from the Navy as much as we possibly can. So when they get a weapon system or a communication system or any type of intelligence capability, we're all over with the Navy, and they're completely open with us because it's to our mutual benefit to actually share those systems. So we've got a very robust dialogue, sir.
Sir, just a couple comments. Exactly what you're talking about, and you're well aware because you were the leader of all that when we got the LPD-17 hull form for what we're working on next. But probably the same thing that the Admiral mentioned too at the Marine Corps, our Naval Board works very, very hard to make sure that we are aligned with other services. And as you know, with the Commandant's planning guidance, not only with the Coast Guard, but with SOF and making sure that we're integrating with everybody. So that's a big thing about the C2 and making sure that we're all using the same type of equipment and we're all the same frequencies. The other comment that I would just make very quickly is that the things that the Marine Corps is doing, we had kind of a little bit of a heads up. As you know, we rolled out EF-21 last year, about a year ago this time. And of course, the Commandant came out with his planning guidance about 2 months ago. So we've already kind of hit the ground running, and we're pretty well aligned already with the tenets that are in this strategy. So we feel pretty good. We've already had a couple of exercises. EW-15 just went up, and we came up with 232 gaps that we have to work on. But most of them luckily are not going to be equipment pieces, just a little bit how we're doing business.
Sir, just the fact that we're here together gives you the indication, and this is the second time this three services have come together to build this strategy, should give you an indication that we get it in terms of what you said, that our objective is to make sure that the individual pieces add up to more when we put them together. I think that's really what you're trying to say. Yeah. There's a bunch of examples. The Naval Board was one. The Air Sea Battle Office is another. It's now, as you know, chaired. We changed the names, Joint Access and Maneuver in the Global Commons, but it's now chaired by the Marine 3-star General Gluck is chairing that right now to drive us to that interoperability that you're talking about and take it beyond the strategy and put the strategy into action.
Sure. Very good. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Ms. Gabbard from Hawaii is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. My question was with regards to the portion of your strategy where you talk about the sea services deploying tactics, techniques, and procedures that target adversary vulnerabilities, and you talk about striking the right balance between kinetic and non-kinetic actions. And I'd like to see if you can detail more what those non-kinetic actions will look like.
I'll take it from Coast Guard perspective. Just here in the Western Hemisphere, the Coast Guard and the Navy have worked together actually for decades against transnational organized crime, most of which isn't taken care of as a kinetic matter. It's actually taken care of as a law enforcement function. So Navy ships carry around Coast Guard law enforcement detachments so that we can use the sensor packages and the floating hull of the Navy to transport our law enforcement folks out there who've actually got the authority to take down the narco traffickers. And there's a whole range of other different activities that we work with them in sort of the non-kinetic or asymmetric arenas. Piracy is another example of that type of work, and some of the other things I listed under maritime security operations, which have as their end game, not a kinetic end game, a smoking hole in the water, but a law enforcement action or a sanctions enforcement or other types of things. And that ability to cooperate between Navy equipment and Coast Guard Authority has been gold here in a lot of missions.
Thank you.
I think that a good way for us to explain the non-kinetic and kinetic, if we just talk about this new function that we talked about, which is all domain access, is a perfect example that we can describe the difference between kinetic and kinetic. It's striking the balance means we can't have systems, things that just shoot down other things, for example. That's cost prohibitive. It will run out of money long before we run out of the enemy having an ability to get at us. So in our work in achieving all domain access, it means working across the full spectrum using all domains to degrade, disrupt, deny, use the cyber and electromagnetic domain to make it harder for them to see us, the enemy to see us, for example, and therefore they can't employ their weapons, or if they did, they wouldn't go to the right place. So that we then can focus our kinetic resources on what got through after we did all that other work to make it much harder for them to be able to find us, see us, target us.
You mentioned in your focus on the Indo and Asia Pacific region how by 2020, approximately 60% of Navy ships and aircraft will be based in the region. What do you foresee could arise that would cause you to deter away from that plan between now and then?
Well, in other words, to not focus on or continue the rebalance that we talked about.
For you to not reach that that size of presence in the Asia Pacific region?
Since that's our focus area, and most of the forces that we have there are already targeted to go there. In other words, we have the forces there, our FDNF forces are there. We've already begun establishing our LCSs in Singapore. The Marines are already moved some forces, as you know, into Australia. We have plans to move an additional submarine into Guam and additional ships into Japan, and they're on track and going to happen in the near term. It's going to be hard for us to come off of that because of the forces that are already there, and in the short term, what we expect to be there just in the next year or so, ma'am.
Great. Thank you. No, I asked the question because I obviously believe it's important that we recognize and continue to uphold kind of the commitment, the strategic commitment that we've made to the region, recognizing the opportunity and the strategic necessity to do that. Given the environment that we sit in, both fiscally and politically and otherwise, it's good to hear the affirmation that this is something that is well on its way. Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Now recognize the gentleman from California, Mr. Cook, for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I want to talk a little bit about maritime pre-positioning and where we stand on that. I was led to believe we still haven't replenished the supplies that were in there from our previous engagements in the Middle East. Can you give me an update on where we stand on that, Diego Garcia, and if you could?
Yes, sir. And I'll get you all the information here, but let me just very quickly go over that. We still only have 2 squadrons. We shut down the other squadrons, so we still have 2 squadrons with 12 ships. Each of those would have the mobile landing platform, of which you're familiar with, the exercises we've been doing off of Camp Pendleton, to be able to selectively offload equipment, load it onto transports, most likely LCACs, and put it towards the beach. So we still have the 12 with a mixture of old and new, TKEs being the new ones that are built in San Diego. But most of the other ships that we're building right now that will be up onto that thing will be that 12, along with the mobile landing platforms, what will help us move those things around. And the ships, is my understanding, I'll confirm this, but all the ships have been replenished and all the gear is on the normal cycle to be turned into Blount Island and turned around on time.
We have anything in Diego Garcia right now?
I'll have to get back to you on that. That's where the ships are, but I don't know if we actually have anything ashore.
Yeah, I'm just a little nervous about, the Pacific the world is very big, and it's a long ways from, North Korea to Australia and to Guam. And, you know, I understand the concentration, and we were in Japan together, of course. The other thing maybe I wanted to follow up on was what is the situation with Okinawa right now in terms of relocation? I know we had that issue in the past, and there's been a change in policy with the Japanese in terms of they certainly, I think, welcome military forces there. If you could just
Yes, sir. No, as I mentioned, when I saw you in Yokota, I was 2 years at U.S. Forces Japan, and I saw the Congresswoman there too. I don't think there's a change in policy. I think essentially, and this is not my lane, we can get you their information, but it's not, I don't think there's a change in policy by the Abe government. They're going forward. There is some that same issues down in Okinawa, but it's my understanding that the work is still going forward, and that's the agreement that we have between our two governments, that they will build the FRF and we will move there.
when is that supposed to be finished? Do you know offhand?
I'll have to get you that number. It's
okay.
a ways down. It's way down the road. But as we said in Japan, we would tell them, "You build it, we'll move." And so it's really kind of in their court right now. So we're working towards that.
Okay.
I'll get you the exact dates, though, sir.
Okay. Thank you very much. By the way, I did want to throw in a plug for the Coast Guard. I had the pleasure of visiting the Coast Guard Academy. Great institution, and encourage all my colleagues to go there. I wouldn't recommend going there in the winter. Go to Hawaii, see, visit the Congresswoman. I yield back.
Ms. Graham from Florida is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You could go to Hawaii or you could come to Florida. I recently had a chance to tour the Coast Guard facility in my district, and thank you for all you do. And I specifically want to thank the Coast Guard for all that you did during the tragedy that occurred last week, where we lost a helicopter training group of Marines and soldiers. So thank you very much for all that you're doing. And thank you, gentlemen, as well, the other two representatives here. My question's for Admiral Michelle. I understand the Coast Guard has been undergoing an acquisition program for a total of 8 national security cutters, 25 offshore patrol cutters, and 58 fast response cutters. In February of last year, the Coast Guard awarded 3 firm fixed price contracts for preliminary and contract design of the OPC. One of those contracts is in my district, Eastern Shipbuilding Group, which is located in Panama City, Florida. Now, I know that you can't comment further on any of these finalists, but I just want to be on the record of supporting Eastern Shipbuilding. It's a phenomenal, small shipbuilding operation. I've toured it, and it's a great shipbuilding yard. With that said, Admiral Michelle, can you comment on the role of the OPC in the Naval Cooperative Strategy, and also on the carefully crafted ratio of 8 national security cutters, 25 offshore patrol cutters, and 58 fast response cutters? I much appreciate your response.
Yes, ma'am. Well, the OPC is really going to be the workhorse of the Coast Guard fleet, and it replaces our medium endurance cutters. 2 classes of those are 210-foot cutters, which will be 55 years old if everything stays on track, and then our 270-foot cutters, which will be about 35 years old when they come off the line with the OPC. And we're very much looking forward to the design work that comes through, and we're very encouraged that we're going to be able to get an affordable and capable platform for the OPC as we move forward. But this really does go to the cooperative strategy, because the OPC is going to be the bulk of the work that's going to be done here in the Western Hemisphere, which is Coast Guard work, by and large, that we've got to do maritime security work against transnational criminal organizations, fisheries enforcement, search and rescue, marine environmental protection, responding to natural disasters, this whole basket of things. This is going to be the workhorse for the nation, and it will allow the Navy and our other forces who are pivoting to other areas where we have national security concerns, they can rest assured that the Coast Guard is there, because we're forward engaged with our offshore fleet, of which the OPC is going to be the centerpiece of that fleet. It's going to be complemented by the higher-end NSC, but the OPC is going to be the workforce, or the workhorse for the nation in that maritime security role. And we owe it to our sailors to give them decent equipment, and 55-year-old ships, which can almost take Social Security. We shouldn't be putting our sailors out there. So again, we're very much appreciative of the support, very much look forward to the designs, and it's critical to the nation. Thank you.
Well, thank you, and I look forward to it as well, and I thank you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back my time.
Thank the gentlelady. Mr. Graves from Louisiana is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you for being here today. I appreciate the opportunity to discuss with you a number of issues important to South Louisiana. Thank you for your update to the cooperative strategy for 21st century Seapower. Certainly helpful to see the integration of forces. In that update, you're only as strong as your weakest link, right? And the Coast Guard does play an important role in CS-21, particularly the role of the OPC, the role of the C-27Js. When you look at the budget request, you're not seeing additional funds in there, and so I'm having trouble understanding how the Coast Guard is actually going to fulfill its role without the resources there to I guess, actually conduct the mission that's laid out in CS-21, and then what type of repercussions does that have with your sister agencies? Secondly, I think this is perhaps part of a larger problem. When you look across, as I recall, the ACI account this year does, as Chairman Hunter noted, experience a significant reduction this year, yet your mission is expanding, as has been discussed here today. And so can you help me understand or kind of connect the dots there?
Well, it's been pretty clear, and our commandants testified that we've had acquisition challenges, budget-driven in large part, and has forced us to continue to extend the length of our ships, whether they're the medium endurance cutters or the polar class icebreakers, where we've just got kind of a patchwork of things to be able to do. You know, we've got the budget, we're going to deal with it. It's going to allow us to finish out the 8 NSCs, which we need. It's going to allow us to move forward with the FRCs, but we've got some serious challenges, and I don't mean to downplay those.
Thank you, Admiral. General and Admiral, could you just quickly comment, again, focusing on the weakest link comment that I made earlier, do you see the Coast Guard with its aging fleet being able to fulfill the mission? Are they dragging you down in regard, and certainly understand acquisition challenges in other agencies as well, but are they dragging you down and challenging your ability to complete your mission?
Well, I'll start first. Well, the Coast Guard's not dragging us down by any means. They're all in not only the strategy, but in working with us. And where they are challenged resource-wise, for instance, if we talk about the Pacific and the Asia-Pacific region, for example, if they can't get out there and participate in a particular exercise that we need to with a ship, they're there with the rest of their forces, whether they send a leadette there or they've already built relationships with the countries we're going to work on. We're leveraging the relationships that they have already. Of course, we'd like them to have more resources and ships to be with us in those regards. But given that the challenges that they have, we're working as closely as we can to get the most out of it. So I look at it more as not particularly that you're strong as your weakest link, that we're stronger because we're doing this together.
Yes, sir. And I would just echo what Kid just said. By no stretch of the imagination are they dragging us down, but I think us working together and by us being here together kind of shows you that we're all in on this strategy, and that we're some of the things that perhaps we can do, the Marine Corps can do, that the other two gentlemen on either side of me can't do. We're going to fill those lanes, and there, of course, there's plenty of gaps in the Marine Corps that both these services can help us with too. So no, by their being all in, I think we all are.
Thank you, and I want to echo comments of some of the more senior members in regard to the icebreakers. It seems like that is once again a capability that is potentially going to challenge all the services if it's not aggressively addressed. One other comment, Admiral Michael. I keep looking at your name in South Louisiana. That would be Michelle, but. Oh, is it? Okay, well, there we go. I was listening to other folks. Sorry. I'll stop following the elders here. Very quickly, in the Coast Guard's Western Hemisphere strategy, you list transnational criminal organizations as a mission of the Coast Guard and something that you plan to address. Could you talk about just briefly how that dovetails or intersects with CS-21? and how CS21 perhaps addresses that challenge?
Sure. The Western Hemisphere strategy was designed by the Commandant specifically to work with CS21 so that we could focus our core competencies here in the Western Hemisphere and allow our Navy and Marine Corps folks to focus in other areas. So the strategy itself, which talks about combating networks, primarily transnational criminal organization networks, which for a lot of these countries are national security threats. I mean, ask a country like Honduras, you know, the extreme murder rates and homicide rates and things that they have in there. And the Coast Guard's presence there really is critical to these nations because it polices off cocaine before it actually gets into Central America and creates death and devastation. Just the effectiveness of the Coast Guard last year seized 91 metric tons of cocaine. That's about 1.5 times all the cocaine seized within the United States last year by every law enforcement agency, and all that seized at every air, land, and seaboard of the United States combined. So that's how effective that is, and Coast Guard interdiction efforts are much closer to the head of the snake that starts this than, you know, a buy bust on the streets of one of our hometowns. So it's a critical national security function. It's complementary to the Navy and the rest of our sea services and was designed exactly to work like that, sir.
Thank you, Admiral. General Admiral, thank you very much. Mr. Chairman, you're back.
Mr. Cummings is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. Admiral Michelle, let me ask you, just picking up on what you were just talking about. Before he retired, Admiral Papp indicated that there had been an approximately 30% drop in drug interdictions as a result of the cuts required by sequestration several years ago. What trends have there been in drug interdictions over the past year, and if we return to sequestration, what impact would that have on drug interdictions? I mean, you gave some very high numbers you just mentioned, and I'm just wondering.
Yes, sir. Well, I can tell you, based on long years of experience, I used to be the director of Joint Interagency Task Force South, which was right in the middle of this fight, sir. And here's the bottom line. For major cutters of the Coast Guard, and this has been over many years, one cutter year's worth of effort sees about 20 metric tons of cocaine. That's about $1 billion in traffickers' profits. Over many years, that was about the national average for all the cocaine seized within our borders every year by one ship of the Coast Guard. That's how effective maritime interdiction is, but you got to get the ships to do it. Right now, the figures are here and there, but about 3/4 of those high-confidence intelligence cases that we know are moving out on there in the water, we can't interdict because there's no ships in order to be able to do it.
So you know they're out there.
Yes, sir.
You just can't get to them.
Yes, sir. I, as JADF director, used to watch the vessels go by, but there were not enough ships out there to be able to action it. And then once it gets into Central America, it's broken into such small parcels, it becomes hard to police up. Plus, it creates corruption, death, destruction all its way, wherever it moves on its way up to our citizens. So it's tragic when it gets past us. But again, that's forward, engaged, ready, complementary, non-redundant, Seapower capability of the nation that works directly with our partners. So it's tragic that we have to see that go by, but if we don't build ships, that's what ends up happening.
What impact have asset failures had on the Coast Guard's ability to perform its missions?
Well, lots of different things, sir. We're lucky that we had a major casualty on Polar Star, but thank God it was kind of out of the ice by the time that it actually happened. But that's a daily occurrence for the Coast Guard. In our medium endurance cutter fleet, our 210-foot fleet, over 20% of the operational hours were consumed by breakdowns. The ships are just that old that I don't say we're in a death spiral yet, but we spend increasing amounts of lost operational time and continuous investment in these old class of ships that could be spent on recapitalization efforts. Again, I wouldn't want to say we're in a death spiral, but we're definitely playing with fire with these old ships. Just a sailor's been around for a long time. These ships are really old and they need to be replaced, and it has an impact on a daily basis, and that's what keeps me awake, and I manage all this old infrastructure with all these pressing missions that are on top of us. That's why they pay me the money, but very uncomfortable position, sir.
Does that, So what do you have to give up then? And so you're spending this time repairing old ships. You got them falling apart. And what gives? I mean, you have a priority of what gives, or just sort of haphazard?
Sir, the risks to the nation in the key areas of the Coast Guard that are fulfilled by these platforms increases every day, whether it's risk of access to Antarctica, whether it's risk of access to the Arctic, whether it's fisheries enforcement, whether it's maritime law enforcement, whether it's our ability to respond to a hurricane or natural disaster or an oil spill or a mass migration incident. The risk in that fleet goes up every single day. Now, we bought some of it down through the National Security Cutter and the Fast Response Cutter, which are way better assets than the ones that they replaced, but they're fewer in number. Our major cutter fleet is going to go, even under the current plan, from 44 ships down to 33 ships. Now, they're a little bit more capable ships, but still, the numbers don't lie. So this is all about risk management, and that's what I spend the majority of my day, sir, is managing risk. Where to place assets, which ones to bring in the yard, how long can we run the ships before they break or catch on fire. That's what I do on a daily basis, sir, and that's what we're incurring as additional risk.
Last question. Can you discuss the state of the Marine Safety Program? That's something I've always been very interested in. What's happening with it?
Well, that's a whole another side of the Coast Guard that's critical to the national security and the economy of the United States. That's all ensuring that our waterways operate correctly, and then we've got licensed mariners and safe equipment and all that. And that is definitely one of the priorities of the Commandant of the Coast Guard under our Energy Action Plan. He's tasked me with putting together an entire plan to revitalize our marine safety program, which is another investment we're going to have to make to ensure that we can respond to new developments in offshore oil infrastructure or Bakken crude oil moving down the nation's waterways, or a whole range of different activities. The marine industry is incredibly vibrant in this country and uses technology more and more as time goes on. But to keep up with that, instead of being a regulatory hurdle to that industry, really requires significant investment in increased expertise and capacity in our people. For a while they're building out one tank barge a week down on the Gulf Coast, and each of those requires Coast Guard inspections. Each one of those requires a waterway to be operate safely on, and that's a whole nother mission set of the Coast Guard. And the Coast Guard's stretched pretty thin. And but you've got my commitment to work on that area, sir. It's on my task list that's getting pretty long these days.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Byrne is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Gentlemen, thank you for being here today. And I know that each one of you are dealing with lots of difficulties because of budget cutbacks. And I appreciate what you do. You're managing a very difficult situation with a very difficult budget situation. It's our job to try to make that a little better for you. By the way, Admiral Michelle, I've got 2 Coast Guard bases in my district, in Mobile, and I've been out in the air assets and in the marine assets, and I've seen for myself some of the challenges you've got in the Coast Guard, and my hat's off to you for what you've been able to do so far. Admiral Dunnigan, I have a question for you. The 2015 strategy identifies the importance of U.S. naval cooperation with international partners. And I firmly believe the interoperability with our allies is critical to creating an agile force. Can you elaborate on the impact of having forward deployed assets like the Littoral Combat Ship in regions like the South China Sea, and what the presence of ships like the LCS means to our partners in that region?
Yes, sir, I certainly can. As you rightly said, this strategy really talks as one of the underpinning things, along with being forward, being engaged, and the engaged piece is with our partners to build that alliance, to build those trusts, to build that trust. To have ships like LCS, as you know, we're putting 4 into Singapore, and we're going to get some more bang for the buck in terms of presence by rotating crews on those ships. That's part of the innovation piece that we're talking about. But it allows us to be responsive to things that happen that build up our credibility in the region, that when the allies turn and look, they see and know and are assured that we're going to be there. The LCS, for instance, was one of the first ships to Fort Worth that we had over there that responded when we had the recent airliner go down. That's an example. When you have humanitarian assistance or disaster response, exactly that kind of ship can provide. But also when we move into the higher end piece, as you know, that ship fills gaps in mine warfare, anti-submarine warfare, and surface warfare. So it was also meant to contribute and will contribute in the event that we have to, together with our partners, get involved in any kind of conflict. So absolutely, that ship will bring us back a return on investment. It's also in other places, though. As you know, we're going to base them in San Diego and Jacksonville, Florida. So the one certainly based in Florida will have better access to support the Coast Guard and what we were just talking about, and the Southcom commander and the missions he has on counter drugs. It's also going into Bahrain to replace the mine ships we have there. But as you know, building the partnerships amongst the navies in the Gulf requires that you have a ship that's compatible with them, where they can see you operating side by side with their ships, and we can definitely do that. An example is we just did a mine countermeasure exercise in the Gulf. We had on the order of 44 nations and 38 different ships participating in that event. Nowhere else can you bring together that many nations to build partnerships and build that trust that we're talking about.
Are you already working on plans for how you will utilize the LCS when it's redesigned to be a frigate?
Yes, sir. We're in the forefront of that, as you know, but it's going to bring additional capability, which means in those mission sets that I just talked about, you're talking about enhanced reliability and survivability because of the weapon systems that we're putting on it.
Well, thank you. I think the LCS has proven to be a very wise investment by the Navy and by the country, and I appreciate your plans and your usage of it. And I yield back.
I'd like to finish up where we started by saying what a good job that the three of you did with all of the individuals working with you. We appreciate your hard work on this, but it's a piece of paper. So, Admiral Dunnigan, how do we go from strategic theory to operational effectiveness?
So that's a great question, and the good news is while we were building the strategy, we took on the piece of how do I operationalize it? How do we implement it? First of all, we have to implement it together. And so because it's a strategy written by us together, all the services are going to participate are already participating in the process of implementation. Some of those processes are well underway with the Naval Board, with our Coast Guard and Navy warfighting talks, with the Navy and Marine Corps warfighting talks. But we also are planning on a series of, as you know, we have a classified annexes coming with after this strategy. That's part of the operationalizing when we bring together the staffs here in the Pentagon with our Naval War College, which runs wargaming for us, with forward deployed fleet commanders and combatant commanders, and begin and execute war games and modeling and simulation, where we can iteratively look at the problems that we're facing in each region. Each region has a certain threat, and each region has a certain plan to deal with that threat. And what we're working forward to operationalize this strategy is now looking at the current way we would get at that threat, running it through a series of war games, and determining if we have any gaps we need to fill. And if we fill those gaps, how would we fill those gaps? I'm sorry. It's not all about buying something new. It may be an adjustment to the concept, so we have concept development work going on. It may be something innovative, like we're doing with high-energy lasers or railguns, or it may be something in cyber. It may be another way to get at the problem that isn't just buying something, as I talked about before, and where you get into this thing-on-thing problem. So we're doing that. As you know, the Navy's also developed a strategist subspecialty code. That's where we've identified the really smart folks, placed them in all the right places so we can link the strategy to what it is we go buy. Because in the end, this force will be what we bought and also how we employ it. So the first part gets at how we employ. The second piece, we have to link this strategy to what we buy. So those are some of the things. There's more into the continuum that we call it, the strategic continuum, that does that linkage.
We heard Mr. Garamendi, Mr. Hunter correctly be concerned about building icebreakers and more ships. If Mr. Whitman was here, he'd be concerned about his aircraft carriers. Mr. Courtney would certainly be concerned about his Virginia-class submarine. As I look at the strategy, it's going to call for an additional 23 forward deployed ships and projects about a 60% increase of Navy ships and aircraft in the Indo-Pacific region by 2020. Where do they come from? Do we build them? Do we bring them from other parts of the globe? And if we build them, do we have the industrial capacity to accommodate this strategy for either?
Well, sir, it's a combination of a little bit of each of what you said. We are building more. As you know, the Secretary was in here and talked to you about his plan for building some more. But it's also about the innovative employment of the assets that we do have. An example is if the ships that we can put forward bring us more return on investment. In terms of the commodity that we give, and that commodity is forward presence. So the ships we put into Rota, Spain, we're putting 4 ships into Rota, Spain. There are high-end DDGs with the ballistic missile defense capability. If we were to resource that same commitment of presence from the United States, we need 10 of those ships. So part of the increase in the presence that we're getting is the fact that how we're employing those ships. The LCSs that we're putting into Singapore, we're putting 4 of those there. They're not going to be based with their families, but we're going to rotate crews. Our modeling and simulation tells us that we'll basically get a 2-fold increase in presence because of that concept. So we'll get 2 ships it would take back here to keep that one forward, if that would make sense. If we were doing rotational, we'd need twice as many LCSs to do that same kind of presence. So it's a combination of the innovative way we're employing it. It is a combination of growing the force to some extent with those that are already in the shipbuilding plan.
Please, General.
Sir, thanks. I would just make one comment that we're already looking, the Commandant has made it very clear that we are looking at all avenues to get Marines out on ships. Now, most of the alternate platforms that we talked about earlier coming from the MPS, those are for the low end of the ROMO, but they could be out there doing theater security cooperation or humanitarian assistance and those types of things, and that helps take some of the pressure off the amphibs. So we still have to, they're not a replacement for the amphibs, but they are complementary, and that they could probably reduce some of the workload on those amphibs. And so we're looking very closely at that, and we're working obviously very closely with the Navy on that, and we see some real opportunity there to help reduce some of that thing. The last thing I would leave you with, and I didn't get a chance to mention before, but coming from 2 years in Japan and watching, I can't speak to the South China Sea, but I certainly can speak to the East China Sea, and the Japanese Coast Guard taking the brunt of that. They have learned a lot watching how our United States Coast Guard and United States Navy work together very closely, hand in glove. And the 2 years I was there, I saw them a lot more interoperability among their own ships by just watching and learning from the gentlemen on either side of me in their service. That's all.
Let's suppose my last question, Mr. Garamendi has a final question, but I know the President's, or the Navy's President's budget request for FY 2016 is 300 ships. We're currently at 287. And let's just say we have one member that might slide in here, be just a little skeptical that we don't get there. If we do not get there and we have a reduction in the number of ships, is this strategy still possible with fewer ships?
So we wrote, the 3 services wrote this strategy based on what our assessment of that environment that I described earlier says that the nation needs from the sea services. So the first thing that I'll say is the targets that we want to get to and how we're going to employ the force and the way we're going to do it and the capabilities we need, and to some extent the numbers are what we believe the nation needs. Now, that said, if we get less than that, we're still going to move out on that trajectory with those priorities, and then we're going to be coming back and talking to you about the risks that then we're going to be taking and where that would be. We'll still work on innovation and efficiency to reduce that risk as much as we can, but we'll be very open and transparent with where we see the risk coming if we're not given the resources to the level that we describe in some parts of the strategy.
Mr. Garamendi has a final question, and after his question, as I told each of you before, we're going to give you whatever time you need as a summation, or if there's anything you need to clarify or add that we haven't put on the record. Mr. Garamendi?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you for putting together this hearing. Gentlemen, thank you for your participation and your service. Admiral Donegan, the revised cooperative strategy for Seapower implies the ready deployment of sea service assets, and it does in fact mention the involvement of the Military Sea Lift Command and the essential contributions that the MSC vessels and capabilities are available. And it does raise the question of whether our domestic sea lift capacity is sufficient to meet the needs of this new strategy. Is it sufficient?
We believe right now it's sufficient. The question, though, I think that we have to address is looking forward as we continue our our iterative wargaming and simulations and modeling that we're doing, as we move to the future and that force is potentially less available or comes under greater stress, we have to see if the combination of all the things that give us sea lift, which is the Combat Logistics Force combined with Military Sea Lift Command and the other sea lift that we bring to support our sea base, are enough to do it. I think that it's going to be a function of the scenario and the location of where it occurs. And we also have, as you know, because each of those vessels require escorts, we have to work that piece too to make sure that we have the right size and shape. Right now, for what we have in the current force, yes. And I think as it comes under stress, because less of those become available, we're going to have to reevaluate that as we go along.
Okay, we have some significant concerns about the future of the Military Sea Lift Command, the aging of the ships and the like. I'd like to get into more detail with you on that. Just another set of questions quickly. The Navy is using UAVs off its ships. And Admiral Dunnigan, my understanding is that you're advancing this program very rapidly and that you're have some satisfaction with the potential that it brings to expanding the ability of the ship to see what's going on and to do its task. Is that the case?
Sir, specifically, the strategy talks about continuing to develop unmanned systems that improve our abilities to do what we need to do. And the unmanned brings endurance, for sure, and it brings capabilities that man does not bring. And I'm not just talking about in airplanes. So this is airplanes, this is subsurface, and this is on the surface. So this strategy has us looking hard at that. In terms of unmanned airplanes, as you know, we have a validated demand for our U-class system, which is CVN ISR, but it also has with it survivable and possesses a strike capability. That demand has been validated, and we're moving forward with that.
Yeah, and I noticed, Admiral Michel, that the U.S., at the President's budget, does not have any money for UAVs. Are you working with the Navy, vaulting off their work and their systems and the application of their systems to the Coast Guard?
Sir, we've been all in with the Navy on unmanned aerial systems for things that might be useful to the Coast Guard. Some of the Navy systems are a little bit too high-end for us, but certainly in the areas, shipborne systems like Fire Scout or Scan Eagle are the smaller ones, and we've operated a number of those systems off Coast Guard cutters. From a Coast Guard perspective on the unmanned aerial system, extremely interested for the same reasons that the Navy is. You know, optimal sensor capability, extending the range of the ship, very attractive. You know, whether those would be land-based or sea-based, or whether they should be small and cheap or higher-end and more capable. Really, the Coast Guard's evaluating all that because we've got to make sure that whatever investment we make there is a wise one. But the Navy has been, and the Marine Corps for that matter, been completely open with us and let us be full participants, sir.
And I would hope you would do this at a little faster strategy, a little faster than the icebreakers. Finally, very quickly, the Navy is deploying a Poseidon UAV off the coast of California, probably for training purposes out of San Diego. Coast Guard might consider being in some sort of a coordinated arrangement with the Navy, since they'll be looking at the same water you are presently unable to see. So I just, if you'll look into that and come back to me with the potential that it might have between the two forces.
Yes, sir, we'll do that.
Thank you. I yield back.
Mr. Hunter is recognized for any final questions he may have.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just one quick question, General. What do you do when it comes to logistics right now? Do they change at all with this new plan? Meaning the amphibious logistics, having stuff everywhere for when we're everywhere?
No, sir, no. It's the same strategy. And you were out, but we talked a little bit about that, and certainly with both the two squadrons that we have that are out there with the MPS, and then, as you know, the MLP will bring that new capability of the selective offload and be able to bring those things ashore. But I think it kind of gets back to as you well know, enemy gets a vote, so it depends on really kind of what the situation is going to be. If it's on the low end of the ROMO or what's going to be in the high end. But we're definitely going to have and the Commandant's been working very hard for the last couple of months wargaming some of the high-end stuff, the A2AD, and I'm sure you were briefed on it. But as we work through that, it will not change the fundamentals of the organization on how we do the logistics, but just a little bit on the distances and how we would protect it and how the sea base, and of course we're dependent on the other services to help us with that.
Mr. Courtney?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Congressman Langevin, who was here a short time ago, had to leave, but he asked me if I could just to forward one concern he had and or question he had. Again, I think as we all know, Jim does a lot of work in terms of cybersecurity with his subcommittee, and what he was curious about was that the strategy of all domain access, in terms of whether or not that extends to cybersecurity, electromagnetic spectrum, intelligence, command, control, other non-kinetic regimes. I was just wondering if any of you could talk about that a little bit for the record.
I'll talk about, excuse me, sir, from a Coast Guard perspective. That's a new term, and I think it's exactly the right term, and it captures those things beyond the physical domain, so ability to conduct cyber operations, electromagnetic spectrum, and that's very important to the Coast Guard to be able to do that. We're incredibly interconnected. We have our own networks. We want to be able to exploit or do whatever we need to do regarding adversaries' networks, and we have a whole regulated industry that we deal with, which has cyber challenges as well from a Coast Guard perspective. So we really have a prominent place in .mil, .gov, and .com, and I'm not aware of anybody else in the government that has that array of expertise and access. But the ability to conduct cyber operations, the ability to do the things that are necessary in cyberspace, as well as the non-physical domains, absolutely critical to Coast Guard missions. And we've got to build out a workforce and a capability in order to get at that. So thanks, sir.
Sir, quickly from our standpoint is the reason that this group together, as we were building this strategy, came up with the concept of all domain access was partly because of the cyberspace issue that we see in front of us. So it's absolutely central to the piece about access, because we're talking about in all domains. It doesn't have to be the physical space by any means. So we've taken this on board pretty hard. As you know, we have an information dominance corps that's tackling this. We have a Naval Academy has stood up their cyber center, so we can start at the very beginning in the training for this. But where it's really going to come to an end is point in the warfighting end of the business is the ability to have the access and use that domain to our advantage. First, we have to defend our systems, but we also have to be able to reach out and touch others, to be able to potentially degrade, to potentially disable, so that we're not constantly, as I said earlier, putting one of our things against another thing and losing that cost battle.
General Jip. Okay, and so again, Jim's sort of observation in the notes that he left here is that, at some point this is about standing up the human capital to be able to do that. And I mean, it sounds like you are trying to sort of form these centers of excellence at the different training facilities. And yes, sir.
Well, I'll just comment that Marine Forces Cyber they're all connected with each other, and of course to Cybercom, but. I think that kind of gets what you're talking about, sir, is making sure you have the human capital and the capabilities and the training, the right people to do those things that'll be this part of the all domain we talked about.
Thank you. Yield back.
And now I'd like to give each of you an opportunity, anything, last comments that you have. And in doing that, could you also include a little follow-up to Mr. Courtney's question? It's one thing to stand these things up. How do we measure success in the non-kinetic domains? That's a little trickier for us, and if you'd include that in your summation. And Admiral Rochelle, we're going to start with you since everybody slaughtered your name today. And thank you so much once again for being here.
Well, thanks for giving the opportunity for me to be here. I think having the 3 sea services in front of you is really the message that I want to convey here, is that your sea services are working together on a daily basis. We have folks who work in each other's commands. We do operations together on a daily basis, whether in the physical domain or whether in the cyber domain. So the taxpayer gets a huge benefit from its investment in all 3 sea services because we're interoperable. We face similar, same challenges, and we work together on a daily basis in a very cooperative manner. So that's the one takeaway. I know we focused a lot on Coast Guard acquisitions. We had our discussions regarding that, but your Coast Guard is ready. Commandant reports that your Coast Guard is ready today. We're concerned about the risks that we're taking, particularly with aging equipment, but your Coast Guard is semper paratus, and I can report that to you today. Issue on cyber, I appreciate your comment, sir. This is a workforce issue. I don't think it's going to be, regardless of whatever whiz-bang equipment, we're either going to win or lose on this based on our people and being able to train and retain those high-quality people that are going to be necessary to conduct the cyber operations that we need in order to make the nation successful. Boy, measuring success in the non-kinetic realm is a lot harder in many ways. But as a Coast Guardsman, most of our end games are not smoking holes in the ground. They are law enforcement actions or regulatory actions or dealing with resilience and being able to rebuild infrastructure and different things like that. So the Coast Guard's comfortable with trying to measure success in non-kinetic solutions, but it's going to be very difficult. What I would say is our strategies typically, if we can defend ourselves, make sure that we conduct our operations in whatever areas we are, and then be able to protect the American people and our other stakeholders at an adequate level, that's probably the ultimate measure of success in most of the non-kinetic areas where I operate, and that would include cyber.
General?
Yes, sir. Let me answer your last question first about how do you measure success. It's more than just being able to keep your C2 systems up and running and be able to command and control and do the things that you want to do. But you have to be able to have those, as Admiral Michelle had just mentioned, how we're going to make sure we have people in there that are monitoring those types of things. But it's going to be very, very difficult to find out. You're only going to find out if you failed within those cybers. But all of us, I know all the services are working very, very hard on that. And the other part, the only thing I would comment about your other question was that everybody in this room manages risk. And we started about a year ago with Expeditionary Force 21, Commandant's Planning Guidance a couple of months. And as I mentioned to you before, we've already kind of moved out on making sure that we're doing all the experimentation and we're working those things to operationalize this strategy. Unfortunately, we don't have a forecast on what the budgets are going to be and how they're going to. We only plan for those. But the basic, as I mentioned, the basic tenets of this strategy, whether it's EF-21, CS-21, or the Commandant's Planning Guidance, sir, I'll assure you that we are working to make sure those tenets stay the same, and that's being ready when this nation is least ready, being forward deployed, forward engaged, building trust, working all those issues, and being the 911 force that you expect us to be. And there's no doubt about that. Whatever funding we end up with, we will execute our mission.
General, thank you. And Admiral Dunnigan, we'll let you have the last word.
Thank you, sir. I'll start with getting at the hardest question you gave us, which was how do we measure success in that domain? It's very difficult. We are working, and it's not one service that's working on this. As you know, Admiral Rogers and Cyber Command are working with all of us as we move forward to sort that out. In the near term, it's cyber hygiene and making sure that we have that piece right, that we have the basic things that we need to be doing as a service. In the longer term, though, it gets beyond that. When we are working and acquiring our systems, we have to acquire them with this in mind as we go forward. And one of the metrics needs to be that has to be one of the things we're looking at as we go along, and it is, but it'll need to continue to be. It wasn't necessarily one of the things in mind for some of the older systems that we've bought, so we have to bear that in mind. But it's going to be difficult, and I don't think that it's going to be easy. And in closing, I think I can speak for all of us when I say we're very proud of the strategy that the three services put together. A lot of work went into it, but we're equally proud of the game plan we have for moving forward to continue to put it and implement it and make sure that we can execute this strategy. And we look forward to working with this committee and the rest of Congress as we do that.
Thank you all for being here today. Thanks for the work you've done, and please communicate to your staffs and the people that work with you how much we appreciate the jobs that they've done. And with that, we're adjourned.